Coming up, it's time to pepper Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies with some questions today. What did they do this offseason? Are they going to be in the basement of the NL West again? And I'm sure he's got some questions for me. So let's get right into it.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm Miller Thomas, host of this wonderful podcast, of course. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, MillerThomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube. So please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. But without further ado, let's bring in the man of the hour to explain the Rockies offseason, to talk about the injury bug. But before we get there, Paul, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, but you say injury bug, and the Rockies are losing another person for potentially the whole season. The third one in a matter of, I think, a week now.
Who have you lost so far? I know Brendan Rodgers. Who else?
That's the biggest one, obviously, headlined by Brendan Rodgers. My pick for who the Rockies all-star was going to be this year. I was very high on Brendan Rodgers in 2023. The Rockies lose left-handed bullpen arm Lucas Gilbreth, who was a solid option out there. And before the Rockies made some moves, was something the Rockies were really lacking in, was left-handed pitching out of the bullpen. And then exciting prospect, not one of the ones that's making as many of the headlines as, in some of the rankings and such, but one that played well for the Rockies when he was up with the team last year at the end of the season. Sean Bouchard, exploded a bicep or something, I think, today, and that's going to require surgery. And they were saying hopefully not the whole season, but that's a 3 to 4 month recovery time after the surgery. So we're looking at him not there, and that's on top of Antonio Senzatella, one of the Rockies' main starting pitchers, being on the IL, and of course Tyler Kinley also hurt as well for the Rockies.
Wow, not such good news to start the season, Paul. I mean, with all those injuries going on, I mean, what are you excited about then from this Rockies team if there's no Brendan Rodgers? Is it the Chris Bryant redemption season, or what's the storyline that's keeping your attention throughout the entire season?
I think Chris Bryant is honestly one of many storylines that's interesting for the Rockies. He's obviously one of the players to watch, and I think one of the ones in the national eye. It's kind of interesting this offseason. Chris Bryant's kind of flown under the radar. I still think people forget that he's on the Rockies. I mean, obviously, with not playing much last year and kind of the world being and the world of baseball, having a lot of stars to dominate the limelight. As much as baseball is bad at marketing its stars in some ways, I'd say now we're kind of trying, at least me being in the area, you're exposed to so much great baseball. Chris Bryant's already in the rearview mirror, but I really do think he has a potential to be a comeback player of the year candidate. He's swung the bat pretty well already in spring training. He looks fully healthy. There's no hitch in the swing. There's no hesitation in the game. It's still spring training, still very early, and we need to see it. But he feels good. He says the full off season, the normal off season, normal-ish even, because this one with the World Baseball Classic, it's amazing that there hasn't been a completely normal, pre-pandemic spring training now in 4 years now. So he's one of them, but of course, exciting prospects. The Rockies are handing the keys over to another rookie at shortstop. They're doing that again. They're saying, hey, Ezequiel Tovar, you are the shortstop of the future. You are one of our top prospects, and there's no one else. I mean, there's no sign pointing that he isn't going to be there. Now, you mentioned Brendan Rodgers going down with the Rockies. Rockies now have a big opportunity to play the main prospect from the Nolan Arenado trade, Luis Montero, at third base, because all signs are pointing to Ryan McMahon being the second baseman for the Rockies now, which is a good move for me. So the Rockies have exciting young players. They have Chris Bryant, who I think has the potential to be, like I said, I mean, a comeback player of the year candidate. I don't think that's too crazy of a thought process to have for a healthy Chris Bryant. And I'm really intrigued by this bullpen that is actually, it's not going to be great. I actually did a whole pod on it yesterday, but it's not going to be a great bullpen. But this is a Rockies bullpen I'm confident will not be last in basically every category. The Rockies were bottom 5 in 4 out of 6 major bullpen categories last year. I don't think that that's going to be the case this year.
You guys might be the only team that matched up with the D-backs bullpen then. But for Chris Bryant, I mean, this is still someone that's like not very old. I'm like looking it up, his age. Chris Bryant is only 30 years old. Yeah, he's still in the prime of his career. And it's kind of funny to go back and look at that Cubs team in 2016 because they've basically blown it all up. But a lot of those stars of that team, like we think they're a lot older than they are, like the Chris Bryants and the Anthony Rizzos of the world. But Rizzo's like 32, 33. Chris Bryant's 30. Like these guys are still in the prime of their careers and they're still major impact players. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like you're talking comeback player of the year. Like if he was, I'm expecting him to probably be the Rockies all-star this year. Like last season, like we know he had like a little bit of a home run drought, but in the 42 games he played, I'm looking at the numbers, he still had a 306 average, a 852 OPS. So even though he might have not had that over the fence power, I feel like that would have come eventually. Just playing at Coors Field for a full season, I think he would have got adjusted. And we see this sometimes with new players in new environments. Sometimes you need a year of adjustment, right? You saw the Francisco Lindors. He needed a year. I think Nolan Arenado even kind of needed a year in St. Louis. So sometimes you just need a year to readjust before you can really get into the swing of things with your new team. And I think Chris Bryant will probably be in for a pretty big season this year. But I want to rewind the clock a little bit, Paul. I want to get back to the offseason because I'm just looking at Spotrac here, Colorado Rockies, and it doesn't look like you guys made a ton of moves. Pierce Johnson, added Brad Hand. You did sign the Moose, Mike Moustakas, to a minor league deal. Like, how are you feeling after the offseason? And why was it so quiet for the Colorado Rockies? This is a team that I've heard championship or bust the last couple off seasons.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's the Rockies are making moves that make sense, but it doesn't match up with their philosophy of we're competing every year. Just that's what it'd be nice. This offseason, people wouldn't be so up in arms, and people were really pissed at the Rockies. I mean, I saw some of the it's like, what are the Rockies doing? They're not trying to compete. They're not trying to do any of this. And the Rockies have earned that reputation. But why go big this offseason? What is the point in going in an offseason where, let's be real, I think the Diamondbacks have a lot of exciting things, and I do want to ask you kind of, because I think we should maybe get later on the opposite of how the Diamondbacks are getting to this position on being kind of a more accelerated upward trend, have taken multiple years now of in the right direction. But it's an arms race at the top. This Rockies roster is ready for the next wave of prospects to come, and the Rockies just need to embrace it and get ready for hopefully the next time when you can look and say, how the heck does this team have 4 to 5 great players on it that came out of nowhere, just like they did in the playoff years when the Rockies were bringing out a team that of an infield that consisted of Arenado, Story, and LeMahieu with Charlie Blackmon in his prime in right field. I mean, the Rockies have exciting prospects to lead to the future. So everything they did I'm fine with. There's really not a move I was necessarily against. They've kind of rotated and swapped out their utility players, which I think is a good move. We knew what Garrett Hampson and Connor Joe and Sam Hilliard were kind of all about. So why not take a shot on some other utility players or some other younger prospects to see how that pans out? Now, this team could have done more. I personally think they missed out by not getting Joey Gallo or someone a power hitting bat in the outfield. I think that's something where the Rockies might have missed. I mean, after talking to some people, connected more within deeper baseball media, it was, you need to be caught talking to Cody Bellinger every day. What 1 year of Cody Bellinger in Colorado, we'll take it. Why not? I thought it was a slam dunk, but perception of coming to Colorado and things were different. But the bullpen, again, sneaky, low risk veteran arms that, yes, they might not be flashy, but at least Brad Hand threw in the World Series last year and had a sub-3 ERA. It's not anything flashy, but when you look at that compared to other Rockies relievers last year, that's fine. And I think the Rockies got some steals in Dinelson Lamet and Brent Suter too. The Brewers loved Brent Suter, and there's nothing when you look at Brent Suter's numbers to be like, what's the issue? It just kind of seems like the Brewers moved on. So these are all moves. You asked at the top of the show, will the Rockies avoid the basement of the NL West this year? And is this offseason kind of a signal then? No, I don't think they will, but it's a team that's going to, I saw earlier our friends at FanDuel had them at 65.5 wins. This team is going to win more than 65.5 wins, but I'm more okay with it because let's see what these prospects are all about and let's build around them coming forward instead of, hey, let's go sign someone to a 7-year, $185 million deal after trading your superstar and not doing that. The Rockies are in a position for a big offseason. I'd rather them be more aggressive with trades. That's really, I think, the biggest disappointment. I think the Rockies can move on from some vets, and I think they're just hopefully waiting to do something at the trade deadline, but we know what happens with the Rockies in the trade deadline.
Well, Paul's saying go lock in that 65 over win on FanDuel right now. And speaking of FanDuel, did you know, Paul, it's the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. We can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more, because my favorite same game parlay to do is whenever the Lakers are playing, give me Anthony Davis 30 points, Anthony Davis 12 rebounds, and the Lakers to win. That one might only hit 50% of the time, but when it does hit, I feel great. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, because there, make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Paul, we're back here on the crossover edition, Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Rockies. And I know you think the Rockies are a lock for over 65 wins, but convince me why, Paul. I know you're talking about the bullpen, but I'm still seeing a lack of talent here. I like Chris Bryant, but now you got all these injuries. I'm looking at the rest of the NL West. Of course, the Dodgers are at the top of the division. The Padres are at the top of the division. I'm making a bet with Ben Kaspick. I'm locking in the D-backs as the #3 team. I'm off the Giants bandwagon. I don't think they're that good this year. And honestly, I mean, they have more talent than the Rockies, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants are closer to the Rockies than they are to the D-backs. Maybe that's too much of a homer take, but give me the elevator pitch as to why there's more upside to this Rockies team than the 65 wins that FanDuel has.
The Rockies have the potential to be a much better offensive team, led by Chris Bryant and highlighted by young guys. These guys are I keep bringing up these young guys, but there's a reason. If there's a reason we find out why the Rockies traded Nolan Arenado, it's going to come in part from this season, because we're going to see Eleris Montero. I also believe that the Rockies starters are still serviceable in a fine rotation. I don't think if the Rockies are able to miss bats and not give up as many home runs and as many hard contact batted balls, I think the Rockies are going to be a better pitching team overall. And we talked about the bullpen. The Rockies are going to win more close games. Now, this is a team that things have to go right. For them to hit the over, and for this team to avoid being really bad, they have to avoid the bad stretch, and that happens so often with the Rockies. 2 great weeks to start the year, they lose 10 of the next 13. And that they do that type of stuff all the time. But you mentioned NL West powerhouse. Guess what? You don't have to play the NL West as much as you used to. New teams are coming to Coors Field. And I think the Rockies have some sneaky under-the-radar guys that are going to surprise people. I think Ryan McMahon still can be a more contributor on offense and see a little bit more from him. And I think Jonathan Daza is an under-the-radar, really great center fielder for the Colorado Rockies. Mixed into the fact, if CJ Cron doesn't have to be your only power bat that, and Chris Bryant is doing what he's doing in spring training. He's hit 2 balls to the concourse, by the way, not just leaving the yard. He's hit balls to the concourse in left field. And you know what happens if you hit the ball really hard to left field in Coors Field? That thing's going to go far. So there's just here, the Rockies they're not the Rockies of last year. That's really the biggest elevator pitch. The Rockies you're going to see names that you've never seen before. And you've watched a lot of Rockies or listened to or followed at least enough of the Rockies where you recognize some of these names, but you're not going to recognize outside of the starters, the ones that you know. You're going to see so many more young guys and potentially some big upswing from some utility players. So it relies on this team is just different. It's new players. It's a new look. It's a new bullpen. It's not enough to say, hey, they're going to make a run for something even like the third wild card. I'm still sitting the Rockies at a 73-74 win team when it's all said and done. But that's a lot better than what people think. The Rockies are not the A's. The Rockies are not the Tigers. That's my pitch to everyone. It's like, folks, I get it. I know that the Rockies didn't do much, but like you're sitting here and saying that there are these teams and they're like, I know the records were close, but the Rockies are about to have a World Series, an MVP come back, and he's going to be massive. I mean, I really don't think the importance of Chris Bryant can really be understated either. Now, those injuries, especially to Brendan Rodgers, that is tough.
And one name that we're quite familiar with that's coming back for this season and got a 1-year contract extension, Bud Black, the manager for the Colorado Rockies, who might have one of the worst managerial resumes of all time for someone that's been a manager for like 2 decades. I think he only has 2 playoff appearances in like the 18 to 20 years he's been a manager. Just really crazy. So I want to know, Paul, is this going to be the make or break season for Bud Black? Is this going to be his final season in Colorado? Or are we just going to keep running back this train until the wheels fall off? Because I'm not quite sure what he brings to the organization. I'm not quite sure he's even a good manager because I just look at his record over his entire tenure. I think he only has 1 or 2 seasons with at least 91 wins. Like, I don't think he's ever been a manager of like a 95-win baseball team, which is like insane when you've been a manager for like 20 years. Like, I'm 25. He's been a manager for like 90% of my life. So it's like, why did the Rockies give him an extension? And is this going to be the final year of Bud Black?
That's a good question. You know, the front office stuff is always so tricky with the Rockies. Yeah. They are loyal to a T. And you mentioned the blemishes on Black's resume, and then you look at him in Rockies managerial stuff, and he's got the most wins, I think, in Rockies history.
It's been there so long. I mean,
yeah, he's like the second longest tenured Rockies manager or something. You know, he's Bud Black's fine, I guess. I don't know. I'm just so confused at what the manager's role is supposed to really be. But with everything with the Rockies, and I really hope they did soon. And one extra thing I didn't get to in my other thing is I hope they brought in a new hitting coach. They brought in someone from outside of the organization. Finally. They didn't just hire. They didn't just promote. They brought in Bam Bam Mullins from the Yankees. And, Millard, I don't know if you know this, but the Yankees pretty good on offense last year.
Yeah.
That guy up there with his fake home run record, which we could, that's a different thing. But, it's could be, but I would love for the Rockies to do a full new embrace to bring in with this new young crop of players. I just don't necessarily sit here and I can say, yes, I want Bud Black to be in the helm leading this next hopeful charge towards a contention window. I don't necessarily know if he does that. Especially think he's a little too, he'll leave his pitchers in a little bit too long in games. But, I think the Rockies' issues are bigger than manager, and especially in the front office. I think there's bigger issues than Bud Black. But again, it's not like Bud Black's doing anything to necessarily sit here and say like, hey, that guy, he's got to stay. It's just also like what you can go get someone else, I guess. And I don't know if that necessarily helps the Rockies. But again, I think the Rockies front office and organizational structure is dying for a breath of fresh air.
Well, it sounds like the hitting coach will at least be a boost to your Colorado Rockies team and the offense. Just like a Built Bar is the perfect boost to your day. Because if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you gotta try a Built Bar. Look, our New Year's resolutions were months ago at this point, but I'm still trying to work out. I'm still trying to eat healthy, but it's tough. I have a sweet tooth. I love candy and stuff. That's where Built Bar helps me and tricks me because I think that me and candy bar, but in reality, I'm actually eating a protein bar that's low in calorie, low in sugar, high in protein, and high in fiber. And the reason it tricks me is because it's covered in 100% real chocolate, soft and easy to chew. And they have unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And right now, you don't just have to go online to get your box of Built Bars. You can still go to Built.com if you want, but now you could go to Sam's Club or Walmart to pick up a box as well. So if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro, and you can thank me later. All right, here with Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies for a little crossover today. And I think I might turn the mic over to you for a second, Paul. If you got any questions for us over here at the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast.
I do. You know, we talked a lot about one thing that's always fascinated me about these two teams and where they've ended up here. These are two teams that matched up in the one-game playoff. What was that? 16?
17? Yeah, 16, 17.
16, I think. Yeah, so 17, 16, one of those years. And I'd say these are two teams in completely different places. The Rockies have kind of fallen and had to hit rock bottom and maybe are finally bouncing back, where the Diamondbacks have started to build things. What is the major difference in the philosophies between these two teams that you've noticed? Is it the front office is more willing to stick with guys or is better at finding some guys? Or are these two teams maybe a little bit more similar than we think?
Yeah, I think they're kind of similar. Like, I don't really know if the D-backs are doing anything differently that the Rockies wouldn't do. It's not like we're going out there and spending money compared to the Rockies. I mean, the Rockies went out there and spent a bag last year in Chris Bryant. We spent a bag a couple off seasons ago on Madison Bumgarner. I mean, Christian Walker is kind of like our version of CJ Cron. So that's like kind of underrated, big power bat. So it's like, I don't know. We kind of got lucky with the Ketel Martes when we traded for him. Like, he was kind of underrated at the time. He's turned into like to be a pretty good player, be an all-star, and at times look like the best second baseman in baseball. And then we had a bunch of down seasons and we just kind of collected a whole bunch of talent through the draft. Like, you got to get lucky with the draft, and we're able to hit on the Corbin Carrolls of the world. We're going to look at the last 2 years with the Jordan Lawlers and Drew Jones and see if those guys come up and be good. We traded Jazz Chisholm for Zach Gallen straight up. Like, the D-backs have just kind of gone lucky. They worked around the edges. Like, not every move they made has worked out. Like, there's a bunch of moves that are really done by the D-backs, like trading away Starling Marte at the 2020 deadline and just getting back like a Caleb Smith is a terrible deal because the A's the next offseason traded Starling Marte and got back Jesus Luzardo from the Miami Marlins or wherever they traded him to. So I think the D-backs and Rockies probably have pretty similar philosophies. They're not going to go out there and spend a whole ton of money in free agency. They want to build this thing internally. And I think the D-backs probably just gotten a little bit more lucky around the margins with some of these prospects that they've hit on in the draft, because I don't think they're really doing anything much differently than the Rockies. Like Merrill Kelly, this dude was like 28 years old coming over from Korea, and he's been like a legit frontline starter for the D-backs, and he's now pitching for Team USA as like the number 2 starter in that rotation. So it's like stuff like that we just got lucky with. Like, the D-backs still have a terrible bullpen. It's been one of the worst bullpens in Major League Baseball, just like the Colorado Rockies. So I feel like we have a lot of the same weaknesses. It's not like the D-backs over the last few years, during both of our times doing this podcast, not like they've reached some great heights while the Rockies have been in the basement. The D-backs are in first place. Like, we're pretty much been fighting for 4th and 5th the last couple of years. And maybe this year the D-backs will separate themselves a little bit from the Rockies, but separating themselves is still being 3rd place in the NL West behind the Dodgers and Padres. So I would say these teams are pretty similar, and the D-backs just kind of gotten a little bit more lucky probably with some young talent.
Who do we need to know? I mean, because I swear we were joking about this. The Diamondbacks are going to call up a pitcher. He's going to make his debut at Coors Field. He's going to hit the Rockies, in the middle of July or something like that. What are names we need to know? Who's going to do the damage for the D-backs this year?
Yeah, there's a bunch of this D-backs team is just going to be loaded with rookies and young talents and players making their debut this season, because you got the Corbin Carrolls, of course, number 2 prospect in all baseball, go on FanDuel, unanimous favorite to win the NL Rookie of the Year. He's coming in projected to maybe be an all-star in his first full professional season, because that's how good he is. And you look at our rotation, we potentially are going to have 3 different rookies make their debut in the rotation this year. Dre Jameson, he had a cup of coffee with the D-backs last season. He seems in line to win the number 5 spot in the rotation. And then a Ryan Nelson, who also had a cup of coffee with the D-backs last season. He'll probably start the year in the minor leagues in AAA, but he's going to be called up at some point during the season to either get opportunity in the rotation or maybe be a back-end bullpen arm. And then Brandon Pfaadt is another guy who will eventually get opportunity in the rotation this year. Maybe it's post All-Star break, but if he starts the year really high in the minor leagues, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets called up pretty soon, because this is someone last season in the minor leagues had over 200 strikeouts in a minor league season. The last pitcher to do that was like 2011 Matt Moore. So he had one of the most dominant seasons we've seen from a minor leaguer like over a decade. So you're going to see potentially 3 rookies get some kind of opportunity in the rotation this year. Corbin Carroll in the outfield. You got Jake McCarthy from last year, still super young. Alec Thomas is coming off trying to have a bounce back off his rookie season. Like, there's just so much young talent the D-backs are going to influx of this team this year. Like you were saying with the Colorado Rockies, like you're going to know the starters, but there's going to be so many young players that are good that you don't know. I feel like it's going to be the same way with the D-backs this year, because I did a podcast the other day just looking at MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospects for the D-backs. I'm like a third of that list, at least 11 of those prospects could realistically have some playing time with the D-backs this season, which seems like an insane number. So I think we're, again, similar boat as the Rockies. We're going to have a whole bunch of young talent, whole bunch of names that people don't know from the outside unless you're doing a Locked On podcast 5 days a week, because it's your team every day, baby. Unless you're doing that, you might not know who these names are. But for us, I think they're going to be really impactful. I think we're going to see a whole bunch of youngsters this season with the D-backs. But I want to wrap up today, Paul, by just asking you, what are your thoughts on the division? Have the Padres done enough this offseason to overtake the LA Dodgers, or maybe just the LA Dodgers letting a whole bunch of talent walk out the door like the Trey Turners of the world and not replacing it? What's your thoughts on the division? Who's winning it? And are the D-backs better than the San Francisco Giants?
I always hate betting against the Giants. That's honestly a harder question, but I'm going to say this. I think the Padres, this is the year. If there's any year that we've seen that the stories, I know it's the Padres and it's been a lot of smoke, but if there's any year, it's this year. And I truly do believe that we're going to see finally, like, the Dodgers couldn't keep up what they're doing forever. And I think this offseason was the start of it. Dodgers are still going to be great. It's going to be a fight till the end, but I think the Padres sent the first message in the playoffs last year, and I think this will be the year the Padres take the NL West. As for the D-backs better than the Giants, I will have to see, because I probably
no
could name like
fence-sitting, Paul. I want an answer
on the Giants, and I could, it's always the Giants. It is an odd year, so I am going to say yes, Millard, and I'll flip this to you.
Okay.
Third wild card spot for the D-backs, or is that too high?
See, I think it's possible, but I'm looking at just last year's playoff field. I'm like, why won't it just be the same teams from last year's playoffs? Unless the Phillies are maybe the team that went to the World Series last year's maybe the team I would pick to miss it, just because Bryce Harper is going to miss half the season with Tommy John. But you're going to add Trey Turner to the lineup, and they're still going to have a pretty good frontline rotation. So it's like, it's hard for me to say the D-backs are going to take that third wild card spot. I think maybe next season, with a little bit more talent on this roster going to next year, and the guys have another year of progression, then maybe something weird happens with the other playoff teams. So I probably won't say it this year, but I think the D-backs, I think the best case scenario, it's September, it's the final 3 weeks of the season, and we're like, hey, D-backs only 3 games back of a wild card spot. You never know. And I think that's the best case scenario for us this year.
That would be a dream for the Rockies too. Above 500 for more than 2 months of the year.
Hey.
Don't lose 100 games, and tell all those people that only said 65 wins to take a hike. Chris Bryant, comeback player of the year. Book it.
Hey, lock it in. Over 65 wins, Colorado Rockies. Paul Holden said it here. Paul, where can the listeners find you on social media?
I'm at Paul Holden 33. You can find the Locked On Rockies podcast at LO Rockies, and free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. You smash that subscribe button to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, just like you should to the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for the personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. Paul, thank you for this crossover today. We kept it tight. We kept it clean, something we don't normally do with these podcasts. We usually go an hour, but not today, sir. Sir, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
You as well.